I hereby present to you Kimberly Morgan. You have the stage now.
Hi, so good afternoon and good evening. It's still morning actually for me here, and I understand that it is very late evening for you guys. So I just want to say happy World Protocol Day. I'm actually very grateful that we have a day to celebrate that because serving in this arena, you realize that people don't take protocol as seriously as they should. And so I'm just grateful that we're getting more visibility and that you guys have organized this second year. So my presentation today is about practical protocol and diplomacy. Really, it's about personal protocol and diplomacy. It is really how you accord and carry yourself within the diplomatic and protocol arena. I'm going to share my presentation screen. I always get the question, what do you do? And a lot of times when I tell people that I'm a protocol advisor or officer, they have no idea what that is. The next question is, what is that? And then I get into an explanation of, okay, I do this, I do that. I have found an easy explanation, and I tend to just say, I do create the environment for governments and businesses to work together. And people tend to get an idea of what you do from saying that. They typically think that that sounds pretty important normally when you explain it to them in that way. But that's a good way that I've been able to enunciate what I do, because people are not as aware of protocol outside of our sphere as we would think. So diplomatic protocol, I mean, you guys have probably heard several definitions today. I like to provide a little bit of context so we don't have to stay too long on these things, because most of you have already been hearing this from this morning. But practical definitions are protocols, the way we do things. It's a set of rules or code of conduct that govern behavior. It's a framework within which diplomacy operates. It helps us to avoid chaos, or it brings order to the chaos that's already existing. An official definition is that it's a set of rules and regulations of diplomatic and social discourse between officials, as internationally aligned by the Congress of Vienna 1815 and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which is really just a guide for how we should operate within that sphere. Protocol helps us to operate in a respectful and seamless manner. In a world where we have so many cultures and different ways of doing things, it's always best and it's always smart to have a foundation of standards to go by, and protocol provides that foundation and standard. What is diplomacy? So diplomacy is the profession or activity or skill of managing international relations, typically by a country's representative abroad, an ambassador, a chargé, whoever is appointed by the government. The art of dealing with people in a sensitive and tactful way, and that's an Oxford Dictionary definition. And diplomacy is also the art and science of maintaining peaceful relationships between nations, groups, or individuals. So for diplomatic protocol, diplomacy cannot exist without protocol. Diplomacy would fail without it. And it is, I always say it's the lifeblood of diplomacy. I remember hearing that term and it has become my personal motto. It really is what keeps it going. And many of my fellow presenters have alluded to that earlier today. So diplomatic protocol serves the image of an institution, organization, or government. So it's really there to make sure they look good. It's appearance and it's how something is presented. It manages governments and officials. Personal protocol and diplomacy now. That's about managing your image as a protocol person or just somebody who has to operate within that sphere. I mean, we all have to operate with some amount of personal protocol and diplomacy because we're always dealing with people, and you always want to make sure that people are feeling their very best. It's about personal decorum and conduct, how you present yourself, your brand. You'll hear people talk about their personal brand all the time in this modern world. And the bottom line is it's just managing relationships and personal interactions. So that's very important, especially in business world. So So things to consider with personal protocol and diplomacy. Attitude, manners, social graces. You need to have a certain degree of cultural awareness. You want to communicate well, and you want to be careful of how you speak, soft power, and how you dress and carry yourself. And I'm going to break down all of these. So for attitude, manners, and social graces, you always want to be kind and welcoming and sincere. You always want to have a candid disposition. Be polite. I remember starting my first job in diplomacy. I was new to that whole arena. I had no idea what I was doing. And a lot of diplomats that were posted in my country, they were from Latin countries, and they were very, very warm. They would greet you with 2 kisses. And that was new to me. But I found that going along, everybody would start to greet you that way. And then over time, we'd all end up at the same events, and we'd all become pretty acquainted with each other. So it was always good to have that warm disposition and be welcoming to each other. You always have to be accurate with how you address someone. You need to get titles right. No, there are many people who are very stringent about their titles. And there's some persons who are not so crazy about it, but as a protocol person, it's always important that you get somebody's title correct and that you pronounce their names properly. You can ask somebody before, for example, when we did presentations of credentials here in Jamaica, we would ask the ambassador or the embassy ahead of time, how do you pronounce this ambassador's name? And we would do a phonetic breakdown, and we would put it beside the name so that whoever was calling up the person or whoever would call them would know exactly how to pronounce their name, so we wouldn't offend anyone. Always want to be punctual and respect others' time, and that's very important because we have a thing here in Jamaica we call Jamaica time, but when diplomats come here, they don't operate on that time. So we have to operate in the normal sphere of time as protocol personnel. Always consider others and the spaces you interact in. Always remember that kindness is the highest form of intelligence. For cultural awareness, culture it's very integral to protocol. One must always consider the culture you are interacting with. It's just respectful. If you need to do your research or homework before you interact. I remember a very important visit for me was when the first Saudi Arabian female minister of foreign affairs, I think she was the vice minister, she was visiting Jamaica, and I was set to meet her at the front of the foreign ministry. And I wasn't sure if I should shake her hands or not. So in a situation like that, you go with the guest, you go with the VIP and follow cues from them. And so I went up to her and I greeted her, and she extended her hand. And so I shook her hand after that. So then I knew it was okay to do that. But I didn't extend my hand first because I wasn't sure if that was something that was okay in her culture. We may have different religions, different languages, different color skin, but we all belong to the human race. So it's just important to respect people's culture. For communication and speech, I heard one of my fellow presenters mention this, like your verbal and your nonverbal delivery is, of course, quite important. Words are really only 7% of what you say. Your tone is 38%, and the body language takes most of it, 55%. So you want to always be aware of how you carry yourself, how you say the things you say them. It's not what you say, of course, but how you say it. And how we write our correspondences. You always hear people saying never respond to a correspondence if you are angry or mad. Probably just take a breather, go and write it after, or there is also another school of thought that says write it, but don't send it. Then go back to it and see how you were perceiving the situation. Soft power. Now, this is one of my favorite things. It's more of a tool of emotion. It's more about persuasion and, interpersonal skills, like how, social skills, social intelligence, how you read signals correctly and how you respond to them. it is any tool that influences by attracting and enticing as opposed to forcing. And a lot of the work that we do in diplomacy is soft skills. You can't force someone to do something. You don't want to force someone to do something. So you want to learn how to negotiate. You want to learn how to persuade someone to basically do what you need them to do for that moment, for the sake of whatever work you have to do. Not in a way of manipulation, but in a way of making sure that they're also happy and you're also happy and nobody is offended. Another or a new version of this, and probably not a new version, but something that has come up is smart power, which is a combination of hard power and soft power. Because sometimes soft power doesn't always work with everyone. And so an amalgamation of the two called smart power, which is a term that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has coined, is another way of going about how you manage diplomacy and protocol. Dress and attire. So you always want to follow dress codes. You want to pay attention to whether it's formal, semi-formal, casual, or smart casual. We have a lot of evolving dress codes nowadays, casually elegant, smart casual, all kinds of things. So it's always important, if you're not sure, to probably reach out to the organization or whoever is putting on the event and find out what they mean by that, because you want to go appropriately attired and you want to be able to fit in and not stand out like a sore. Always consider hygiene. I had a high school teacher who she'd always use this term with us: be nice to be near. And that was referring to just your whole department, how you were, everything, including smell, hygiene, everything. So it's just a nice way. She'd always say that to us, and we'd always know what she meant by that. National dress or attire is also a consideration when you're dealing with the diplomatic sphere. I know that for some countries, when you're presenting credentials or when you're going to some of these official and state ceremonies, they might say that you can wear national dress. Most countries have national dress. It's always important to know what your country's national dress is and have some idea of whatever country you're in, what theirs is as well. And always dress for the job you aspire for. How does all these considerations matter to you as an individual? Well, if you're getting all these things right, then you can influence people, you can have healthy professional relationships, you can get invitations and entries to different spaces, and possibly a seat at the table. Now, for me, when I was coming into diplomacy and being new, I found that these things worked for me in how I moved through the diplomatic sphere as a new person in that sphere. I would necessarily say they're all hard and fast rules, but a combination of them and just keeping them in mind helps you to navigate that arena very well. Because how you treat others leaves a mark on them. And I'll leave you with this. This is a very important quote that I love, and I'm sure many of you know, and it's always a good reminder. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel. So as a protocol professional in your capacity, however you serve, it's always important to try to make people feel good. Just be respectful, just be kind, just in pure human decency. Thank you so much, and always remember to put your best foot forward.